orchestra one last night, so congratulations on that, on the Star Awards. Annika and Richard.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you so much. How do we get this?
There we go.
There we go. Welcome to our talk. Today we would like to take you on a journey from the audio conception to the delivery, and also just share the challenges that we faced and how we try to overcome them.
So, we're not very good at self-promotion, I'm afraid. So, but I'm Richard, I'm the audio director of Remedy. I've been in the games industry for probably about 20 years now. I've worked at Remedy for the majority of those, about 14 years. I've had a few different titles in my time. They've always gravitated in and around either narrative or audio.
And I'm Annika. I'm a senior development manager at Remedy. I have been with the company for 3.5 years now. And I came there with a lot of experience in project management and leadership. And I did learn everything I know about audio and game dev from Richard and his amazing team by working on Alan Wake 2 with them.
Next slide.
Yes.
So, what is Alan Wake? Well, I'm going to give you kind of like a game dev breakdown. So it's a single-player, third-person game, psychological thriller, action with thriller. It has 2 main playable characters. It has Saga Anderson and Alan Wake. It has a slow-moving dual narrative, and there's 2 main locations. So there's Pacific Northwest and Dark Place. And during this presentation, I'm going to interchangeably use Pacific Northwest and Washington State, because Washington State was a dev name and it just sticks in my head. So you have to bear with me with that. But for those who don't know the game, I'm just going to play the trailer to set the mood.
I'm trapped here. In this nightmare. I write to escape. Every word is a step forward. Into darkness.
I'm glad you're on this case with me, Anderson. It's right up your alley.
The victim was one of their own. FBI Special Agent Robert Nightingale.
So you knew our victim?
Only the rumors. He was chasing a writer.
Someone knew they were here. Was playing a game with them.
Killer left a message.
It's for us. The text is about us.
We were all trapped in a horror story. The horror story wanted us dead. There's something I'm forgetting. Something important. Something's not right.
Easy now. First things first. What's your name?
So, let's go back in time. Let's go back to 2021, set the scene a little bit. So, actually, 2021 is when I started on the project. And as you might remember, there was a pandemic, which was just ending. And the Alan Wake, it's kind of had a troubled development point, partly because of the pandemic ending, but it was not in a happy place. And when I came on the project, I did an evaluation of the audio team, and 2 main concerns came up. So there was a morale and motivation issue, then there was a scheduling and scope issue. With the morale and motivation, what I was finding is the audio vision was not clear to the team. We had a game vision, we had an audio vision, but they weren't gelling, they weren't mashing together. And also, the team were feeling quite a lot of external pressure. So there were staffing concerns, and Remedy were taking on quite a lot of projects, and they could see this kind of mountain ahead of them, and it was concerning for them. And actually, also, our XDev model was highly inefficient. So there was a lot of kind of management overhead when working with external development. And the sound designers kind of saw this as that as the game progressed, they would end up becoming ex-dev managers.
Yeah, and while looking at the project, we were just struggling with a very challenging scope, which is probably not very uncommon in game dev. But this, and also knowing that there were direction changes very likely, but we couldn't anticipate which ones, it just led to us not having a lot of foresight. So it was very difficult to figure out when and how we should be ramping up the team to properly cover our work. And there were also some technical uncertainties because our engine was undergoing changes, and the team had to change from one scripting language to another one, which basically meant that everyone had to completely change their workflow, and it took away a lot of time and just led to more uncertainty. So at the end of the day, we had some direction issues and very much production challenges and just those motivation issues that Richard mentioned. And we really needed to get our vision and the way of working with the team in order. And we will start with talking about the vision.
Yeah. This is the audio vision. Audio vision is contradiction in terms. So, but jokes aside, what actually is an audio vision? Is it a PowerPoint that you box tick at the end of pre-production for a publisher? Was it a redesign of something, like another game? All these things are really important and they do help. But for Alan Wake 2, I really wanted to break down what is an audio vision. So I want to start actually by drawing parallels with visual art. This is from Cauldron Lake, so this is from the mood board. And you can see the images here give an impression of the space, the color palette, there's an epic landscape, and the framing, how the camera is. It gives you a very clear, immediate image of what this space is like. And this is the same from The Dark Place, the artificial lighting, the reflections, the city. You get a very visceral feel of what the place is like. And this can then go on to quite easily, this is actually paint overs from the game, if you can see them on the screen. But it's quite easily translatable to concept art and doing paint overs and then ultimately into the final game. And it's not a one-to-one relationship, but it is quite a close relationship. You go from the original vision all the way through to the final game. But with audio, there's some really hard truths. So audio is time-based, it's not static. You can't create these like collages of images like you can with art. It takes time to listen, so it's an investment. And the presentation is not immediate. Like, again, it takes time to listen. It's hard to describe, especially for non-audio people. So I've had game directors say they just don't know how to talk about audio at all. And art has a common kind of vocabulary, but audio doesn't in the same way. And it's also very subjective. And then audio is also reactionary and it works in parallel. So this is the biggest problem for the vision and the budget and the scheduling. It's reactionary to art, gameplay, animation, but it also needs to work alongside all those disciplines all at the same time to actually hit the schedule and get it done. Audio is huge in AAA games, kind of the games that Remedy makes. They are enormous. We handle more assets probably than any other department. I would guess for Alan Wake, we might actually have more assets than every other department combined in the game if you count all footsteps and all dialogue and everything. It's really, really a lot of stuff. And we also service almost all of the game. And if you go back to the vision, you can't really cover everything in an audio vision that you're supposed to cover. Yeah, so you end up in this situation when you're in the concepting phase of a project that you need a vision for the audio team, but you're on really, really shaky ground because you don't really know what's going on. But you also need to evangelize for a publisher or for the audio team or the other directors about what the audio vision is. So with all this in mind, I actually condensed this down and kind of made a statement about what an audio vision is. And this is it. So basically an audio vision is a concept that establishes a framework. So as a director or a lead, you have a solid foundation to build on. It's a framework for building a plan, or so it establishes an idea for a plan, how to organize delivering the direction. And it's a method and approach for talking with the team. So to put this into reality and to answer these questions, I kind of came up with this. This is the actual audio vision for Alan Wake 2. And I know it's difficult to read, but this was presented to Sam and Kyle in December, like it says. And I know it doesn't look like much, but it is actually really carefully constructed, and it's basically broken down into 4 sections. I just have to warn you, the next slides, because I wanted to show something real in this, like something I actually did. So I haven't kind of made this presentation. This is the real thing that I used. So they're very hard to read on this, but hopefully if you watch this afterwards, you can kind of zoom in and see what they actually say. So in this light, you're probably not going to be able to read it. So the first part is about language. So we start by describing the language we use to actually, it's the rules of engagement effectively with other people. And audio is a language of emotion. So I encourage the team and the directors and anyone to use emotional language to describe audio, and more so a simplified, unified language to describe sound. And this helps break barriers between directors, the audio team, and it gives us a lexicon to use to describe audio. And there's an actually offshoot to this that I didn't know when I wrote this, but it gives tangible goals to the audio department as well, because you can ask questions like, what does that feel like? Does it feel right? It gives you a benchmark to hit for their design. The next one is the elevator pitch. So this is based, this particular one is based on what is similar between the original game and what is the different elements we're adding to the new game. Because at this level and this stage of the project, those are the easiest things for people to grasp. And it's basically broken down into 4 main discussion points. So we have the homage, well, it's the Alan Wake and Twin Peaks. So that's what was the same with the original game. But I called out what I consider to be the most important differences from the original game. So the pacing and structure is really different. So how are these two, like the original game and Alan Wake 2, how do they feel different, basically? The duality and contrast, the relationship between these two worlds, Washington State and the Dark Place, which I was using like Stranger Things as an example for, and also the character, how the camera is against the character, what the speed of the camera is, how the fast the character moves. Those were the most important things for me when I was going into this. And then the next part of this, the core of this, is what I call the dinner date. And you can see here that what I'm trying to do is build a relationship with the game. So it starts from a very simple idea and then builds forwards. And the dinner date is basically just a more detailed version of the previous slide. So it just dives deeper into why each reference is this. And I have to point out this, the references in these videos are not sonic references. They are not designed for the sound designers to copy. They are talking points, and they give context. And it's quite often that the references, when choosing references, they actually only have one element in there that you're interested in listening to. If you get a reference, it has music and dialogue, but you actually need to specify what is the important thing within that reference. And just because you can't read this, I thought this is one of the references with the text, so you can see exactly what I'm doing. So this is just a use of atmosphere and ambience from Twin Peaks. I'll play it for you so you can get the idea. Love it. Yeah, and the final part of the core is actually what I call the aesthetic pillars, but actually that's not what this is. So you can see I say Washington State, which is quirky, the dark place, which is imagined like dreamlike reality, and the horror, which is kind of like this violent manipulation. But in reality, what this slide is they are metaphorical pillars. They represent pairs of aesthetics. So, and if you look at the narrative, which is where I took this from, these pairs of aesthetics are considered like they're all over the narrative. You have light versus dark, you have Saga and Alan, and the combining force of that is the horror. So the point of this is because I've established this this pair system, it forms a framework on how to think about the game audio, and it helps keep the cohesion of the game vision together. So I'll explain this now. Let's go into actually a practical example, and I'm going to use quite a mundane example. I'm actually going to talk about Alan's revolver. So the first question is basically, how do we construct a good weapon sound? I've been doing this for a while, so let's skip that and just go, okay, good weapon is mech, body, tail. That's the assets you need to make a good weapon sound. This is a simplified version, of course, but the next question you then ask is like, how can the revolver confirm our pillars with this idea of duality? And you can actually go, for the mech and the core, no, that doesn't work. This sounds too short, and it's got to sound like a gun, and it's got to sound like a revolver. But for the tail of the gun, you can go, okay, that's a longer sound. You can put location information. We could actually use that. So what we did is we split then the tail of the revolver between the Washington State and the dark place. And from there, you start going like, how do we get that contrast in that we're looking for in the game? And go, okay, one of the ways we could actually do that is by having the dark place tails actually made by another sound designer. So to make sure that they're very different. And this, by doing that, you've actually added, you're feeding basically the pillars into the production as well. So your pillars is now becoming part of the production cycle. And you can go on further from this, like what's the tech implications of this? So for the mech and the body, you can just play it straight through basically. But then with your pillars, with the divides, then you're feeding that into the Y structure, for instance, or how the assets are loaded as well. And then again, you generate tech tasks based on your pillars of the idea of the thing that you're actually trying to do. Yeah, again, feeding back into production. And then you can keep going with this. It's like, yeah, are they loaded? Are they streams? You can, yeah. But the good thing is the basis is still based on your pillar structure of the game. So I guess you want to know what it sounds like. For this, I was using DevTools, so I gave Saga the revolver. In the game, she can't actually have the revolver. So the animation's a bit off and the reticle's in the wrong place. So don't judge us on that. So what about production?
Yeah, what about production? Well, I know we're on the audio track today, so I'm really sorry, but we do need to talk about production. And I had to do that with the team as well, because chances are if you are in audio, you might not even have proper production support. And that was the case when I joined the project. The team hadn't had a single dedicated development manager to support them. So I had to sit down and figure out how can I help the team in a meaningful way. And I would just like to highlight what I think are the most important responsibilities of my role that I then took over. And, oh, sorry. We'll start with communication. So communication, the bigger your team is, the more important it gets to get communication right. But even if you have a small team, you have a lot of people working hybrid these days, or you have people work from other countries, you have external partners. So it becomes more and more crucial to have a really good framework for communication and to just streamline communication. And I think it's a really big topic that I can help the team with. And then we come to planning. So whether you work with a publisher or not, someone will at some point want to see the progress that you've made on your game. So you need to plan ahead and figure out where you want to be at a certain point in time. And also if you work in a downstream craft or with a downstream craft like audio, you need to know what other people and other teams are working on and when they are delivering their work. So planning is really essential to provide this necessary level of visibility. And it is also helpful to plan your work properly, so you know if you can actually do the work in the time and with the people you have. And if you can't, you need to find ways to work around that. And then we have tracking, which is obviously very connected to that, but you need to ideally have all the work that your team is supposed to do tracked somewhere. And this gives vital information to other teams, and it helps with the planning. And you also need to track your work to show dependencies between other teams. So those things are all connected. And if you do them properly, you will gain visibility. And I think having visibility is probably the most important thing in game dev. And that's probably especially true if you work in audio, because your devs need to know when are things happening, when are they ready for them to work on, are there any delays, are features changing, is the scope of the game changing? They need to know. So as a DM, or even if you're a lead that doesn't have a DM, you should be their main source of information. And that doesn't mean you have to know all the answers, but you should know how to get them. And I think I would always encourage people to be proactive and work independently, but they should always feel like they can reach out to you and ask you questions, and that should be a big part of the job. So, and next I want to talk about why audio is especially challenging when it comes to production. And the first one is dependencies. I'll just keep the revolver that we already looked at. And I make this actually very simplified visualization of dependencies. But the point is, there are many teams that will touch an asset or a feature before you even get to work on it. And then chances are that they go back and rework what they've done. And then you need to figure out if you need to change your work as well. And then there are other teams like VFX, for example, that are also very late in this chain. And you will always have to keep in mind that there will be a very late pass coming from them that you potentially need to work on. And they will also want to go back and iterate on their work and make it better. And then you need to go back there again. So this is a huge thing that often gets forgotten. And the next one is delays. So I'll just keep the revolver here. And again, this is very simplified. But the point is, it happens. Teams are late with their work. That's just the nature of our work. But those delays add up. And by the time you get to work on an asset, the delay of 1 week for each team has added up to 5 weeks. And that is a really long time. So we need to make sure that while we wait for those assets, that the team has meaningful work, that they can do something instead. And you also constantly need to keep track of how much time do you have left at the end? Because if everything is late, you will have just a huge pile of work at the end of the project that you cannot finish in the short amount of time. So you always need to be on top of that and communicate those things to other departments, and just make sure that you're aware. And then we have design decisions. or even design changes, small changes, can have a huge impact on audio. But audio is often not involved in this decision making because audio is looked at as like a post-production craft. But for example, at the beginning of a project, when there's a decision between whether we want to make an open world game or a more linear level kind of game, that is a very huge information for us, because then we would either go with a more systemic solution probably, or if there's a linear game, we have a more unique assets and manual placement of them. And it will also actually affect how you staff your team, because you might want more techie people for the open world game than for the linear game. Or automatic versus single shot weapons has huge implications on audio. And one example that we had on Alan Wake 2 was very early on, we had the decision that no NPCs are going to shoot firearms in the game. And we had to just constantly remind everyone, like, please don't add any firearms on our enemies, because we would have had to build an entire system to even for just one enemy. So thankfully, all the generic enemies ended up having like melee weapons, and they were just throwing stuff at you. But the point is that we needed to really champion and advocate for our team to make sure that either we are involved in those decisions or we just keep our ears open and catch those things when they change and bring them to the team to figure out, does this affect us? Like, how bad is it? And how can we solve this? Okay, what does this mean in practice? Or what did I do in practice? We were talking about planning and tracking, and for this you need a production tool. That is often dictated by the project itself. So you will have some kind of production tool like ShotGrid or Jira. And then you need to use it to just keep track of the workload and for your team, for individuals, for long-term and short-term planning. And it's also very helpful to understand how scope changes affect your team. And we were also trying to figure out how good are we at estimating our workload, because that is really important information and data that we can use in future projects. And what I did help my team with in terms of production tools was, first thing was training. I think I came on and I thought, oh, everyone knows what to do, but it turns out they did not. So I sat down and walked the team through, this is how you use the tool and this is how it makes sense. So they need to understand why they're using the tool, not only how, even though it's important to know how, of course. And then the second one was maintenance. So I needed to make sure that whatever structure we were using was always up to date and like reflecting changes or cuts. And then just take care of our backlog and also make sure that all the work is assigned properly to the right person, to the right milestones, and so on. Because this is the only way we can provide visibility. And what I also found really important was to provide the team with a view for them, whether that is a dashboard or a list, but they needed to be able to find a view that just shows them what they need to do or whatever it was that they wanted to see really, and not like search through Jira or ShotGrid for an hour to find their tasks or something. That doesn't help anyone. Even though I think it's really important to make this tool yours and make sure that it makes sense for your team, you also need to go back and make sure that the big picture fits and it's aligned with how the rest of the project uses the tool. Because that's the main thing, to give other teams visibility and gain visibility for your team. And then the other thing was communication. So I talked about why it is important, And what I did in practice, or we did in practice really, is to talk with the rest of the project teams. That means you talk to other development managers and other leads to make sure that you get vital information for your team that you will then take back. So talking to the audio team regularly to pass information to them, but also to make sure that I know what's going on, or we know what's going on, and if there are any obstacles or challenges, anything that we can help with, anything that we can push forward. And then, depending on seniority, I want to say is communication with directors or EPs, studio management, publishers. You might want to have to update them on the status of your team, and also point out any risks and discuss how you can work with those risks. So it all comes down to stakeholder management, which for us meant to just balance expectations with reality constantly, and also make sure that you kind of build a bridge between those directors and our studio management and our own team, and just make sure that they're all on the same page and have the same information. And there's one more thing, and I think that's the most important thing. It's the team. This is some of our team, and we needed to keep people engaged, especially for me. Not everyone is very fond of production, and they think it's boring and maybe even useless. So I really need to make sure that they understand the value of it, and not just do it because I asked them to. So I try to keep things fun or light. Of course, if there are serious topics, you need to address them appropriately, but everything else can be a bit lighter and not super serious. And I also try to really connect with them on a personal level. I sat down and talked to each team member for half an hour when I joined. And I found at least one thing to connect over with every single one of them. And you can use that as a foundation to build a relationship, and then just get to know this person, figure out what makes them tick, what motivates them. And that really, really helps you in your daily work if you understand how you can bring your point across and just make them, do their work properly in a good way. Yeah. So now that we've looked at some of the team, we want to go ahead and talk about how we worked with the team.
So, like I said at the beginning, back in 21, the team was not very well motivated, or they were feeling pressured, and we needed to basically develop a psychological framework for the team, a place where the Remedy Audio team could thrive, an approach to succeed in quite a volatile, like Annika was saying, it's a pretty volatile place to try and work. There's uncertainty there, and also we need to develop an approach that we can kind of bring in XDev or external development to support the Remedy team and not be a burden to them. And I have to say the ideas that we come up with, well, we didn't come up with them at all, basically were stolen shamelessly from these two books. And I do recommend anyone in a leadership position to actually read these. And they both, in essence, deal with something called a VUCA organization. So what is VUCA organization? So it basically stands for volatility, which is environmental shifts, unforeseen altercations, uncertainty, rapid erosions of reliability of historical data, complexity, amalgamation of intertwined dependencies and relationships, and ambiguity, inherent uncertainties, and multiple interpretations of information. And I'm really glad I got through all of that, because when I was practicing, it was hard. So VUCA is basically volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. And this describes game development, and it particularly describes audio development within games. And you should Google it. It's worth looking at, and I really do recommend reading the books. You will get quite a lot of hyperbole and soundbite and management stuff in there, but I kind of like the solid idea behind it. I think is quite good. So next slide.
Yes, so this is stolen from the book. But what we wanted was for people to be up here in this learning and high performance zone, because usually when you work in game dev, you have high standards to begin with, but if you provide only low psychological safety, you end up in this anxiety zone down here, and that will lead you straight into burnout. And obviously that's what we wanted to avoid. Hence, we work towards this idea of fearlessness and psychological safety. And it's basically kind of philosophical guidelines for leadership to navigate this VUCA environment. And the idea is to create an environment where people feel safe, but also challenged and driven. So the idea is not to just be nice all the time. It's important to have candor and be open, and it's encouraged. So it doesn't mean that there's no conflict. It means that you know that there will be conflict and that you need to deal with it with mutual respect and just face it head on, to be honest. And this is a philosophy that we also applied with our external partners and not just the internal team.
Yeah, I'm again going into soundbites, but I actually really like these two sentences, and it's kind of like the way that I try and run the team. And it spills down to basically traditional leadership or directors and managers. That traditional framework is the deference and assessment. But what this is an acknowledgement that there is an inability for one person to be accountable for everything. And there has to be a collaboration and shared accountability through experts. And this is particularly true with the current complexity of AAA audio. I think it's really important.
Yeah, so just to clarify a little bit further what that means in practice, this is a simplified overview, and the example here is concept and beliefs about failure, because we often come from a place where failure is just regarded as a bad thing, and it's not acceptable. Successful people don't fail, so as a result, your team will try to avoid failure. They might even hide it just in fear of repercussions. So moving away from this perception, we needed to accept that failure, especially in a creative industry, especially if you work in audio, it's just a natural byproduct of experimentation. And that is our daily work. So the key here is to really reaffirm this understanding that failure is okay, and that people should learn from it and share those learnings and then just move on. So we needed to create this environment where people felt safe to try out stuff and maybe fail and then just learn from it and move on.
And again, this is an oversimplification, but like I mentioned earlier, because of the uncertainties of audio production, like the parallel development and the dependencies, if we worked within the traditional framework, it leads to the director, or my job. I basically become the bottleneck for the rest of the team. And if the reframe is really important because it allows for fluidity and acknowledges uncertainty. So ultimately, for instance, when I designed the vision, I had this in mind. So it is abstract to the point, it's designed to be abstract to allow for change and have enough information in there that I could go and talk and evangelize the audio. But it also gives the sound designers enough room for agency within the framework. And this is why, and maybe the point of this whole talk, why the core, from my perspective, the core and the vision is so important to get right at the beginning of the project, because it forms the foundation of the input and the collaboration that you have with your team.
Yes, and this is basically an overview of how we try to work with the team. So basically starting with creating this vision and then making sure that there is focus and clear priorities for the team so they know what is expected of them. Also explaining the why is crucial so we have a shared understanding and just work towards a common goal. And then we really needed to make sure that we all understand that the sound designers are the experts in their area of focus. Like Richard and I can't know everything. We are there to set up structure and processes to help them and also to put our trust in them. And then we just really needed to keep in touch with the team and what they're doing by providing regular feedback, offer help, and course correct if needed. But it is a very hands-off approach that really promotes to the team to be proactive and take on a lot of responsibility, which I think makes them care more about what they're doing and probably makes them deliver better work.
So, learnings. I did not know what to write on this slide. I have to admit, I wrote this yesterday, to be honest. Because it's not because I didn't learn anything, by the way. It's just there is so much in this that we've given you a hell of a lot of information. But for me, I think being successful, and I would like to say that Alan Wake 2 on the audio side was a success. It is genuinely a team sport, and that's kind of emphasized by giving the agency and responsibility, which kind of highlights this. In my personal career, in the past, I looked a lot on the why and what we are doing. But this is the first time in any project I've really gone deep into like how do we actually do the things that we do? And I think what I've learned the most from this is the how, which is the ultimately drives the success of the vision. It's how you work with the team. It's the thing that means that you as a director or lead can get the thing that you want out of it.
Yes, this is my slide. Sorry, I went full production on it, of course. But on the negative side is basically the learning. So we had a lot of trial and error with our XTUF approach. Ultimately, it was successful, but it took us a while to get there. We also used 2 different production tools for tracking. I would not recommend. It turned out to be very painful. We also still ended up with a decent amount of overtime. I don't want to hide that fact. It could have been worse for sure, but we want to obviously get away from that. And the positive is not really learnings, it's just things that I'm really proud of. I think we really created and nurtured a really good team that was motivated, even though the circumstances were not always ideal. And we also managed to ship a world-class game with award-winning audio. And I also think I wanted to point out that we didn't lose a single audio designer. They're all still with us, which I'm very proud of. And that leads us back to the team. I think it's really about them, and those are the guys that put in all the work and really made this happen. Thank you very much. Do you want to use the phone? Mine is down there. Sorry. Our wonderful community manager, Vida, asked us to take a selfie with you all, so I hope you're ready for that.
Yeah, you ready? What'd you say? We have to go to the middle and turn around. I think that was the instructions. Thanks, Vida. Oh, hold on, the camera's the wrong way around. Shit.
You can do it. There we go.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Hey, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard and Annika. We have time for one quick question, but before we do that, can I ask everybody to update your JIRAs, please? Thank you very much. One question, I thought I saw a hand over there.
Hello. Very good talk, by the way. Thank you very much. Talking about vision, so clearly it looks like you start the project that you already found your pillars, and of course, you start and these pillars are very solid. But as an example of what happened to our production, we start with some strong vision, strong reference, and strong pillars. But then maybe a game like Alan Wake 2 come out during production, and that inspires a lot of us to say, hey, this would be cool. Maybe it was not in the initial plan, but it's something very inspiring. And our vision start to change a bit, maybe we start to get inspired by new stuff. So my question is, how much did you let your vision be contaminated throughout production, or how much you wanted to actually just stick to it?
That's a good question. What I'd really try to do, well, I think Alan Wake is kind of a special game because we have, Sam is our creative director. He has a very strong narrative vision when he starts, and he's been planning this game for 13 years. So basically when this started, the narrative structure was in place. So what I did with my vision, because I didn't want it to change, is I tried to design the vision around the points in the game that I thought were the most solid. Basically, that's it. I know this does happen, and this happens to me on other games. It's like what this is about. It's about fluidity and volatility. If there is a big shift in the way that the game is moving, not just the audio, but the game itself is moving, and you're going from linear to open world or something, then of course you're going to have to update it. You're going to have to reevaluate. You're going to have to update. But this goes back to having the core correct and really breaking it down to what are the fundamentals, what this game actually is. If it's just, maybe Alan Wake does come out and you want to go in this direction, but maybe the fundamental of the game is still the same. And if you've built your core correctly, then it shouldn't actually change. I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah, answer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.